we're so lucky she's here with us today. Our next reader is one of our Lenny most favored women. She is a graduate of my alma mater, Oberlin College, a place that loves to have protests about nothing. And she is so talented, so thoughtful. She's written for places like Cosmo, ESPN, Fusion, and Lenny. Please give a warm and enthusiastic welcome to Kendra James.
So I'm going to bring it down a little bit. This is a minor story about a friend of mine from high school who died before our 10-year reunion, and I'm going to tell it with a little bit more levity than the situation deserves. To protect the names of the innocent, I've changed all the names of the people in this story and renamed most of them after characters from Bravo's Southern Charm. It's about boarding school. Shanae Brown spilled ketchup on Otito Hayes' white Air Force Ones during lunch. Otito gave Shanae the ass whooping of her life and did so on top of my lunch table. Soon after the table collapsed on me and my friends, I realized that I was not cut out for public high school in New Jersey. So I went from a school of over 2,000 to a prep school of just under 500 in Connecticut. Whenever someone asks me to describe the level of wealth I lived in, I don't tell them about the 2 ice skating rinks or the dorms with ensuite bathrooms or the squash courts. I just point out the students here weren't allowed to have after-school jobs, and no one complained about that. It's fair to ask why in the year 2016, a school still exists where a 20-year-old man can call himself a postgrad as if he's earned some sort of doctorate and keep paying a college-level tuition to play high school hockey for as long as it takes the NHL to recruit him. A 9-figure endowment helps, but these schools have figured out that it's memory and not the dollar that's their most lucrative currency. It's the collective alumni memory, not the dollar, that keeps alumni remembering what makes their school great and keeps these prep schools exclusive, because usually what makes them great in memory is the exclusion of certain people, like those who are gonna catch hands over Air Force Ones and catch up. And it's exclusivity that keeps these places relevant. I graduated in 2006 in a class of 111 students. We started with a class of 127, but my class in particular worked really hard to get that number down. Generally, one of 4 things would happen. 1, half of us would receive a circled 2.5, which is a D+ C- in boarding school speak, on our first English papers early freshman year, and the resulting mental breakdown from not being the smartest person in the room anymore would call the herd. Number 2, every test we took ended with a hastily scribbled, "I pledge my honor that I have never given nor received help on this exam." Failure to adhere to that scrawl was grounds for instant expulsion, and the early days of Wikipedia were really hard. Number 3, you can only get away with pissing in bottles and dumping the contents out of your dorm room windows onto unsuspecting passerbys if you play varsity soccer, lacrosse, or hockey, and some boys had to learn that the hard way. And number 4, at least one of us got chased out of school by their roommate, and while I'm not admitting to anything, I also have no regrets. The names of the fallen are listed in the back of our yearbook, labeled as missing in action, which sounds better than 10 kids who couldn't hack it, 3 who weren't potty trained, 6 cheaters, and 1 girl who thought her roommate was a real-life witch. The rest of us, the ones who made it, are engraved in red bricks, neatly laid on the path in front of the main building that leads out to the girls' dorms. I sit between a girl whose face I can't conjure anymore, and the son of the woman who gave the speech about gonorrhea of the throat every year. I never spoke to any of them. To be completely honest, I don't actually remember most of the people I graduated with. Show me the class picture taken at our senior dinner, and I can name 9 other Black students, both Filipicans, that's Filipino and Puerto Rican, there were 2 of them, and a handful or so of the East Asian students in the crowd, and they were mostly Korean, but most of our class would not have been able to tell you that. I can name the 2 white girls I was close with, but the rest blend together in groups of messy buns held back with that elastic tape, and tiered Abercrombie miniskirts and school-branded flip-flops. I did not have a single close white male friend in high school, which is a wild contrast to anyone who knew me at Oberlin, and would be hard-pressed to match pictures to names of more than 5 of them in my class. The smallness of us, people of color as a whole, made those of us who were different, Black, Latino, Asian, gay, white and chubby and dabbling in Wicca like every girl who watched Charmed my age did, stand out even more. And you quickly figure out that standing out is very different than being remembered. Black students aren't really part of the institutional memory, which how can we be? We haven't really been a part of the institution very long, any institution really. Why would we be? Memory is currency, and we are not a people of generational wealth. But we were still there, and we stood out. I maintained a double standard, assuming that we would all be remembered, while I actively worked to forget the rest of the people I went to school with. High school tropes teach us that there's always one person who isn't remembered, usually the quiet, mousy girl who grows up to be Drew Barrymore. Not the kid who jumps off the graduation stage rather than shake the headmaster's hand after getting his diploma. That was my friend Peter, and like most of my friends, he was Black. My memories of Peter are hazy. This is his fault because I spent 75% of my time with him concussed. I had more than is strictly healthy, more concussions during high school than I should have, and Peter gave me 2 or 3 of them due to thorough lack of impulse control and ability to think more than 15 seconds into the future. In fact, my most vivid memory of Peter is me tripping on a can of hairspray as we ran across a field as a Latin teacher chased us because he had caught us blowing fireballs onto a lacrosse field with an aerosol can. That was concussion number 2. I wouldn't have been friends with Peter under any other circumstances. He was too wild for me, and his rash decision-making paired with anger management issues that ended with a fist through more than one dorm room wall. I've had boyfriends like him since then, but not actually friends. But our choices for companionship were limited in our tiny, highly segregated class. Sometimes it feels like the friendships that I made in high school are friends of circumstance rather than friendships with strong relationships and emotional bonds that were meant to last through the years. This is a great attitude to take to your 10-year reunion. I attended for 2 reasons. One, out of a sense of responsibility, wanting to make sure that the Black students of 2016 felt like they had representation amongst the returning alumni. Some so old that they'd lived at a version of the school where they called us coloreds and kept us in the kitchens. And second, because I have never left that place without something to write about, and thus a check. I made the requisite small talk with people I didn't recognize or remember. Somehow I ended up standing next to Shep, a Navy SEAL from my year who leaned over to me during the march and said, unprompted, "Can I tell you a secret? This is the most sober I have been on this campus since sophomore year." I kept Shep talking, not because we had been friends, but because his coffee reeked of brandy. It was 11:30 in the morning, and conversation with Shep seemed like a really good cure for writer's block. We got around to the conversation about people who weren't there. No one I was friends with, I pointed out. He seemed surprised as I went down my own reunion-themed MIA list, including Peter's name. Trying to one-up me, Shep said, "Yeah, well, Whitney and JD aren't here either, because they're dead." "I know, so is Peter," I said. Shep's reply was succinct. "Wait, who? What?" And so I explained what had happened to Peter. I explained it to Shep, and then to Apollo as we walked by a memorial bench engraved with the name of another past classmate. I told Landon and Craig about Peter's death while we stood in front of a plaque hung in honor of a classmate who had died in a car accident in 2012. Catherine, Tom, and Jenna cornered me after we listened to the eulogy cum scholarship fund establishment remarks in honor of a classmate hit by a drunk driver. By the time I had left, I detailed Peter's death to the majority of my class. I stood in a school that held memory above everything else, and no one knew my friend had died. Whitney and Cameron died first in car accidents, neither of which were their faults. As is tradition for those who die within the first 10 years of graduation, the school made a deal of it. Announcements in the quarterly magazine, campus benches, scholarship funds, plaques, the whole 9 yards. JD went last. He created a meme, a popular one you've definitely heard of or participated in. It was so successful that it actually ended up saving lives, which is ironic because it ended his. JD died while he, Shep, and a few others were celebrating the success of that meme on a roof of a seaside mansion in Rhode Island. They got drunk in celebrating and decided that the next logical step was to dive from the roof into the pitching Atlantic waters. The shoreline was rocky, and JD never resurfaced. Shep, who was, remember, a Navy SEAL, took a swig of his coffee as we talked and shook his head. Hell of a great night. One minor hiccup, but a hell of a great night. Patricia, one of my friends from high school, listened over the phone while I told her about our conversation later and recapped. So we created a meme, got drunk celebrating that meme, and then jumped off the roof of a mansion in New England. Well, that is the whitest and most male way to die I have ever heard. I'm often reminded to donate to a memorial fund in his name. Peter went out in a worse, but still unfortunate fashion. The last time I'd seen Peter, he'd been planning on shipping out with the Army. He hadn't gone to college. And the few times that I'd thought of him after that, I'd assumed he'd done that. Not so much. From what I'd been able to piece together, Peter never made it to the Army. He ended up training as a state trooper and was close to graduating from the program when he shot his girlfriend in the arm. And after she'd managed to run away, turned the gun on himself. It made the local news. None of us who remembered Peter were surprised that this was how he died. Anyone who'd spent 5 minutes with him could see the anger, the temperamental issues. Peter was the kind of kid who should have flourished in a class of 111. Every teacher should have had time to zero in on the 16-year-old kid leaving holes in the walls. How do I know no one stepped in? Because he kept leaving holes in the walls. They were hard to miss, and a charge of attempted murder preceding suicide made a strange sixth sense to all of us. The shock on my classmates' faces at our reunion confirmed what I already knew. They had not known us then, and they didn't remember us now. Peter didn't get any scholarship funds in his honor. There's no memorial. He didn't deserve them, the benches or the plaques. But it still bothered me that no one knew, that the school hadn't sent out any kind of notice of any kind like they did for the others who died so early and tragically young. In that moment, I wish they had, if not out of respect, then at least to save me the job of doing it for them. This was still tragic at every facet, and for no one to know only added insult to injury. I stood on a campus built on memories, walked down a hallway lined with the faces of men dead for decades who hadn't shot at their girlfriends, but also hadn't been on the right side of issues like women's rights to votes, or the Chinese Exclusion Act, or the colonization of the Philippines. They were draped in crepe banners celebrating the completion of our multi-year capital campaign, which, thanks to donations from Roger Ailes, had met and exceeded its 8-figure goal, as if to say, don't get it twisted, you've always known what's valued here. I had my own double standards surrounding memory, and the school clearly had theirs. All at once, I remembered just how unseen I'd felt during high school. I was hyper-visible, always being pulled into admissions photos to present the appearance of diversity, and being pushed forward as the first Black legacy to graduate since 1891, i.e. ever. We were certainly visible to the white students who saw us all sitting together in the cafeteria and wrote op-eds about it in the school paper instead of talking to us about it. Teachers knew where to find us when they needed extras for an ill-advised production of To Kill a Mockingbird, which, don't do that if you only have 25% diversity, doesn't work. They knew where to find us to do an ill-advised production of To Kill a Mockingbird, the track field, and they knew who to send to collect them, me. We were seen by our classmates as a homogenous group from a Trumpian lens, all from the inner city, all poor. Our school boasted being truly known by your peers and teachers as a perk of small class sizes, but I have real questions about that. Reactions to Peter's death just confirmed what I'd already known. To be Black at a New England boarding school is to be touted for your statistical presence in the student body and ignored everywhere else that's not an admissions view book, even in death.